from don't make it out. I know that I'm blessed. There's a few L's and millions, so turn that loss to a check.
For those of you that don't know Jeff Marr, that don't know his story, let me make a quick introduction. He is a high-level performance coach. He is an author to a book called The Drive. Phenomenal story about his brother, about an accident and how he had to go through that and process it. Not to mention his own personal story that I'm sure we'll get into today, but also an entrepreneur, CEO and founder to 9 different companies, one of which is a supplement company that we have here today called Win Every Day. This is a pre-workout, but he's got an entire supplement line. Public speaker, what else? Father to 7 kids, which is for sure a topic I want to talk about a little bit today. But just an all-around amazing dude. I'm honored to be able to call you a friend. I feel like at this point, and just somebody who really has really overcome an amazing amount of adversity, has really found a path where he's looking forward to helping millions of people grow and transform and change. So again, dude, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here, man.
Sure, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So maybe we start at the very, very beginning. Because you've gone through quite a lot over the last several years, but what was really the impetus to start you on this path of personal growth, personal development, deciding to go into the coaching side of things, compelled to write a book? What sort of started all that? And, hopefully you can kind of share some of that personal story we were just talking about.
Yeah, for sure. So I was a police officer for almost 8 years, and I knew I wanted to be a cop from the time I was in 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. And really looking back on it, it's just because it's always been my calling to just help people. So I had an 8-year career. I unfortunately made some poor choices off duty, a lot of it surrounding alcohol, which we'll get into for sure. Because alcohol use is bad. And I was using that to cope with a lot of the PTSD and trauma that I experienced throughout my career. But so it's always just been in my heart, and part of who I am is to help people. And so when I lost my career, I started a couple of construction companies, and I know how to build stuff. I just don't like it.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like alcohol abuse, drug abuse, do you feel like that runs through pretty rampant in like police, fire, like service positions where there's high levels of stress?
The alcohol abuse for sure. The drug abuse, I found out afterwards, quite a bit that I didn't know that I was ignorant to when it came to drugs and use and all that. But, the alcohol is definitely a huge thing, and it was one of those things that, you would get together at barbecues or whatever, or go out and drink after shift. And that was just the way you did it, and didn't really talk about things or process them. And really, if you look at the history of police work, that's what it was all about. Even back in the day, Eastern United States, out in New York, those guys would go get their shift drinks in uniform. And so, it's a huge thing to try to cope with it, because when you're in that position, at least for me, when you're in a position where you're helping other people daily and you're problem solving, and you got to show up and be the calm to their storm, it's hard to admit that you have a storm inside of you that you can't fix.
Do you feel like that is something that a lot of individuals have prior to going into law enforcement? Like maybe it's subconsciously, but they've got something that they feel like they need to almost reach outside of themselves by helping other people to maybe fill that hole of something maybe they're dealing with themselves personally.
Yeah, I don't think that, I wouldn't call it to fill a hole. I think you have a calling, and I worked with plenty of cops, met plenty of cops over the years. There's plenty that shouldn't be cops, and then there's people that are just cops, to the bitter end.
Sure.
That's me, whether I wear a badge or not, like that's my mindset. That's my mentality. I evaluate every situation I go into with a certain way. And there's just certain people built like that, a lot of military people too. And I don't think it's necessarily to fill a void. I think it's just your calling. Like it's what you're built to do. But then when you don't handle the trauma that you see and that you're a part of the right way, that's where the void comes in. And that's where, instead of coping and handling it the right way with coaching or therapy or whatever, you drink because it numbs it, and you get through it because you're numb to it. I mean, there's certain people that get into it because, whatever. I worked with plenty of people who got bullied, and they're,
yeah,
so that was their attitude. And
sure.
Anybody who's dealt with that cop knows that cop that I'm talking about,
Yeah. Is there an appeal with law enforcement in general because of sort of the power position that you're placed in?
What do you mean by appeal?
Well, I think that anytime you give anybody some level of power, there's almost like it's I would imagine it could become an addicting feeling because you've got that power, right?
Oh, it went to my head for sure.
Did it?
Yeah.
What were you doing before law enforcement?
I was a child.
Were you going to school or?
No, so I knew I wanted to be a cop. And when I hit 18, the Army actually had a little 2-year enlistment at that time back in 99.
Okay.
Way back in the day.
Okay.
But I have asthma, and my recruiter, was like, oh, just don't say anything. And I'm like, dude, I played sports at 9,000 feet up in the mountains, and I'd be fine. I could sit on the couch and have an asthma attack because there's pollen in the air, So I'm like, I don't think I can lie about that. So I became a dispatcher for a couple of years, and then I timed it out to where you can't be a cop till you're 21. I graduated the police academy 3 weeks after I turned 21, and I already had my job with that police department lined up. And so, yeah, I literally was a kid. I mean, I had a couple kids of my own by that point. I had my first when I was 17. So I grew up quick, but yeah, I knew it. Like I said, from the time I was in 3rd grade, we had an assignment to, pick what you want to be when you grow up, which is a great question to ask 3rd graders.
Yeah.
They all know. But I literally remember drawing the picture of the police. It was either a paramedic or a police officer. And I was like, well, cops get guns. And then I went through the DARE program, and I was like the student of the, I was the head student. So I was like, I'll be a cop. And that's it, man.
What does it take to be the student of DARE?
I don't even know. I did no drugs, I guess.
Just know what DARE stands for. You gotta recite it.
I don't know. I remember playing football every time we had recess with that cop and just staying close to his hip. So that might have been part of it. I don't know. But I mean, it all worked out, and I absolutely loved my job. I loved what I did. But as a 21-year-old kid, I went through an academy at 20, turned 21, and I look at 21-year-olds now and I'm like, holy cow. I actually just found some pictures of me from when I was getting sworn in. It was like, oh, well, I would never listen to that kid tell me to put my hands behind my back. But
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at 20 years old, you're told you're the man, you're in charge, you have to handle this stuff. And you don't really have a choice. And I think a lot of military people experience that too in different realms, because they're 18 to 22 years old and going to war and in charge of a lot of stuff. But anyway, there should have been a better cap on that for sure. With that, the power goes to your head. And by the time that I lost my career, I felt like I was invincible. I had the Superman mentality. I was badge heavy and not on duty. I was very respectful. And like I said, I loved what I did. And I was a small guy for a really long time, so I had to use my words a lot, So I wasn't physically intimidating. But really? I graduated high school at 130 pounds.
I mean, dude, you're incredible. So that's something that you've developed over the last...
Yeah, once I lost my career, I always went to the gym, but after that, I just kind of really dove into it. I was $160 when I quit being a cop. So.
Let people know where they can find you right now.
Oh yeah, my Instagram handle is the bearded bodybuilder.
Bodybuilder.
The bearded bodybuilder. Yeah.
The bodybuilder. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Cool. On Instagram.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then Facebook's just my name, Jeff Marr, Marr.
Sweet. And we'll get into this stuff here in a minute. But
yeah.
So was there an event that happened when you were on duty or off duty? Like what? And had you been big into drinking before joining like the academy or becoming a police officer?
So yeah, my journey with alcohol started when I was 12 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was 13, my buddy and I, because we always broke into his mom's liquor cabinet, we ended up, he had a bottle of vodka at the bus stop that broke in his jacket. And being 13-year-olds, we thought we'd still go to school and nobody would know. So principal's office, whatever. It was the first time I never received a spanking because my dad's.
No evidence other than you
Oh
just
no,
held
yeah,
vodka.
we had been drinking too before I went to school. But anyway,
Okay.
like my dad literally said, "I'm not gonna spank you because I would not stop hitting you." So
And this was at 13.
that was 13 years old. Yeah. So I then quit drinking, quit doing any of that, didn't do drugs. I didn't even drink at my high school graduation party. There was me and one other kid that were sober when the cops showed up, so they let everybody go with us. And then, so my 21st birthday was the first time after that I got drunk. And then really, I didn't drink till I was about 25, so about 4 years worth of dealing with trauma and situations that I wasn't processing. I saw my first person lose their life. She got ran over by a bus, unfortunately, and
Goodness.
that was 3 months into my career. So, 21-year-old kid. Again, I look at 21-year-olds now, like, holy cow.
Did you have a partner? Were you with anybody?
Yeah, I was with a training officer, but, she had I jumped underneath the bus to try to help her, and just, you watch the life drain out of somebody's eyes and their soul leave their body. It's pretty traumatic. And
You were involved in trying to rescue the person?
yeah, she had she was standing in front of the bus. The bus driver didn't see her, started taking off, and she got pinned under it. So, yeah. So I was underneath there and like holding her hand, and there was they had to put airbags and lift the whole bus up to get her out. But so again, even at that time, I remember I went home numb. I just stood in the shower for like an hour and just cried. I didn't know what else to do, but I wasn't a drinker then. So it was like cumulative trauma over time. And then I just started and went way too hard when I started.
What's the department like when it comes to people experiencing this type of trauma while on the job, like being able to share your feelings? Is it sort of like you got to toughen up and you don't, and that's why you went home and did that? Or, it seems like nowadays they have probably support groups and therapy, and you have the ability to share that shit. But
oh yeah, there's a whole lot more now. That was 20 years ago when I was first a cop. So it wasn't great at all. And it wasn't even said, nobody told you to toughen up. It was just, that's the culture.
it was just sort of the culture.
Yeah.
Right?
So you make jokes about it.
Interesting.
A lot of dark humor involved, but eventually it catches up to you because we're human.
Yeah.
You're not supposed to see the stuff that we see, and accidents and mangled bodies and, all kinds of stuff. So, but to answer your question about the one event, so that really did change my entire path of my career, and I just spiraled. I had it was New Year's Eve of '99, and had an 18-month-old that we had been to his house a couple times on medical assist. He had seizures. He had a terminal illness, but the call was 18-month-old. His dad can't wake him up from a nap. His dad's doing CPR. So we get there. My partner and I get there. We set him down on the floor and start doing CPR. She's doing compressions, and I have the mask and couldn't get a seal around his face because he's a little dude.
Okay.
So I ended up doing mouth to mouth, and that just blew up my brain. I still remember that feeling, that moment. I've done CPR on 14 people, and so it's not something I didn't know how to do or wasn't prepared for. But I also had a child. My 6th youngest was the same age at that time. So there was just a lot of stuff involved there. And, we ended up getting him in the ambulance. They had a rhythm when he left, but you give somebody enough drugs and they'll have a heartbeat. They're not alive. But and I do remember I left that call and I got dispatched immediately to like a hit and run. So, you like, when you ask about how you compartmentalize these things, you just don't have a choice. I go from that, a little kid just dying right in front of me to there's a cold hit and run. So you have to switch off from that and then go, and my partner that was there on the call with me had sent me a message on her computer and just said, "You okay?" And I started to write back, "I'm fine, you good?" And I just deleted all that and just said no. And honestly, in a lot of my message that I share now, even with first responders and law enforcement, is if you think there's a problem, there is. And like that should have been my sign. When somebody asked if I'm okay and I said no, I should have known. But again, when you're used to being the person to fix it, and like you alluded to, you have that mentality, and some people might call it badge heavy. And honestly, at some point you have to have that mentality to survive and to be, if somebody's shooting bullets and you're going towards it, you have to have a pretty wicked mindset to be like,
Absolutely.
This is what I do. But it does need to be tempered here and there. So, So yeah, that just sent me spiraling. I was actually planning my suicide on duty. I was accident reconstructionist, so I would show up to these gnarly accidents and then put them back together and say how fast people were going, who was at fault, all that. So I knew coming down I-70 into Golden which wall I needed to hit, how fast I needed to be going, what angle to hit it at. And I literally was planning all this out. So that way I died on duty. I died. And it was an accident. And then, my kids would think their dad went out a hero and all that stuff. So
you had premeditated the whole thing.
Big time.
Goodness. I want to go into that here in a second, but I want to go back also because you're saying that when you think of an event that took place, it was the event with that 18-month-old where just didn't wake up after the nap and it was from a seizure.
It was, like I said, he had a terminal illness. And really, it was about a week later, I was walking through the police department and, backtrack a couple days before that, we had gone to the memorial service for this little guy. And there was a ton of firefighters and paramedics there, and then us 4 or 5 cops that were there, just because they had been going and running calls on him since he was little. So everybody knew of the kid. And the whole time, couldn't find his dad anywhere. And as soon as we were leaving, his dad came around a corner, and his dad looked at us and said, "I hope I never see you guys again." And it kind of struck me weird, right? And I'm like, dude, I've had nightmares the last week because of what happened. What does that even mean? Yeah. And he said, "I know what stop sign you guys hide behind, so I always make sure to stop." And so whatever. And I was like, okay, kind of a douchebag move, but all right. Well, a couple of days after that, a detective caught me in the hallway in the police department and said, "Hey, we have service, EAP, employee assistance and counseling, whatever."
Okay.
She said, "I know that's a tough thing to see. If you need that, just a reminder." And then she said, "But I was looking through the case and I don't see any crime scene photos." And as soon as she said that, man, my head just blew up and I was like, no way. So really looking back on it, we handled the call like a medical assist. We didn't take any picture. We should have processed it like a crime scene.
Is that typical protocol? If
it should be, if you really
anybody has died, you have to kind of treat it that way.
Not necessarily, but an 18-month-old not waking up from a nap, it should have sparked a little bit more. It's nothing that ultimately got in trouble for. I actually received a commendation, a chief star for my performance there, but still, I knew. And then I looked at all the circumstances regarding it, and I know in my heart his dad killed him. And
you're kidding?
No, because his insurance was changing. They weren't going to have the same coverage. And like I said, this was New Year's Eve. January 1st, everything was changing. He went to the hospital in the evening around 6, I think, and they pulled the plug at 11:30 p.m. So before midnight, not even 24 hours, right? So you take all this into account, and I process stuff fast, right? As soon as she said it, all that flooded my brain. I was like, holy cow. There was no telling signs, right? If somebody gets smothered or strangled, there would be marks in their neck, but if somebody gets smothered, they get what's called petechiae, which is blood cells in your eyes blow up. It's kind of harsh to talk about, but that's your body's last ditch attempt to breathe. And so you'll have red or pink dots in your eyes, and he had none of that. So there was no blood, there was no evidence other than the fact that he just didn't wake up. Like I said, he had a terminal illness. Who knows what his lifespan was, but I just know. So what do
you think he poisoned him, or how would you do that?
I have no idea. And honestly, man, from that,
no signs of suffocation, no signs of strangulation.
There was nothing immediate, but we also didn't process a lot of stuff, and nobody thought to call and get a hold of the medical examiner to go get the baby from the hospital. They cremated him within 24 hours. It was a quick process. So you just put it all together.
Does that, you think that happens often?
Yeah.
Things are just processed quickly without really taking a step back and asking questions?
Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. And at some point there's a human factor involved,
Yeah.
At some point there's just evil people in the world. And
how long after the bus incident did this happen with this kid?
A little over 7 years.
7 years later?
Yeah.
Got it.
And between that, there's tons of stuff. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
when did you start, I know you were kind of drinking throughout this process, but were you drinking heavily, or was it just sort of going out with the guys, having a few drinks?
Yeah, like I was on a hockey team with some guys on the police department, so we would go there and drink, and it was social. But again, it was that Superman mentality, you know. I mean, one of my buddies backed out of a parking spot into another car one night and took off, you know, hit and run. We were drunk, like we're not calling the cops. Like,
And was he a law enforcement as well? Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we all were, but and everybody at the bar knew, and so it was that mentality. But it was lighthearted, right? Lighthearted, I say.
Sure.
So it was after that incident, though, that I would start pounding bottles of Jameson. Just
By
to
yourself, or were you with?
No, by myself. Like, just wanted the voices to stop. Just wanted it to stop, you know.
When did the voices start?
Oh, for me, when I was a teenager, that's really when I started dealing with depression. But specifically to that incident, it was just like this repeat, you know. And you talk about PTSD and like the literal definition of it, you know, even talking about it right now, like I could put myself right back to where I was. I know when the call came out, I had pulled somebody over. I was a traffic cop. I was a motorcycle cop at that time. And I was writing them a ticket, and the ticket took longer than it usually would have. And so, like, I still, like, honestly, until last year, you know, 13 years of processing this over and over.
Yeah.
And, like, I was on the shoulder, and there was some dirt on the shoulder. And when I pulled out, my tire spun. I'm like, that was a half a second. I could have been there quicker. Like, I could have saved his life. Like, so all of these things, right? And at that time, it was even worse because it was fresh. So that's what made it all go away, was drinking. And I ended up getting put on light duty because I hurt my back, and that prevented me from doing the whole car accident thing. And it was a short time after that, probably within a month after that, I ended up losing my career. And I had gotten into an argument with my ex-girlfriend. There was pushing back and forth, and I got arrested for domestic violence. I mean, there's a long story to that, but that's ultimately
just pushing, or was there more?
Yeah, no, it was pushing.
It was.
I was wrong. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was wrong for what I did. Shouldn't have put my hands on anybody, especially in that situation. And again, a lot of
Were you
that.
drunk?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
big time. Yeah, it was a day of day drinking, and fighting back and forth through text. You know, and there's tons of drama and chaos
She was pushing
around
you as
it.
well.
She was coming at me, and I grabbed her and pushed her past me, kind of threw her past me. So, I mean, like I said, I was wrong for what I did.
Yeah.
But yeah, that sealed the deal. And after that, you know, could never be a cop again. So it was a week before that, though, that I actually literally was in my truck with a gun to my head, pulling the trigger, and by myself, and something yelled no at me. And so, yeah.
So, dude, that is incredible, but also remarkable, man, because what I know of you and what you've managed, I mean, 9 companies, sports nutrition line, you've written a book, you're doing public speaking, you're developing your personal brand. I mean, like a radical transformation. And I think, you know, guys, for any of you listening to this that either is in that dark place, or you've got a friend that you know is in that dark place, like, have them reach out to Jeff. Have them get a copy of his book, which you can find it on Amazon.
Yep.
It's called The Drive. But get in touch with Jeff. This is what he does. He can help you through a lot of this. So, wow. So, okay, you had premeditated the suicide, and like you said, you had calculated the driving off the side of the highway and what angle to hit it at. Was that before the, like, you having a loaded gun to your head?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was while I was still on duty. I hurt my back, so I was on light duty, which really didn't help the spiral, because
What happened to your back at the time?
I literally got out of a cop car.
Really?
I twisted weird. It popped. My legs went numb.
Oh.
And that was that. So I was going through physical therapy.
Okay.
And one of the worst things that you can do is put a cop into records. And so, you know, I went from being,
What does that mean?
well,
Put a
when I was
cop into records?
yeah. So my light duty, instead of just leaving me sit at home, I was
I
in
see.
the records
I see.
department filing all day.
Okay.
For 8 hours a day. You know, so like
Uh-huh.
you go from this Superman mentality, running around with your hair on fire, ready to take on the world, to
Clerk.
sit at,
Yeah.
a clerk. Nothing against what they do, but we're just different mentalities, different speed. And then also listening to the radio and other people going to calls, you know. And so that was hard too, and didn't help because I drank heavily every night. You know, I get done, go drink. And I was going through
Drinking every night. Like what?
Jameson.
How much?
Oh man, I couldn't even tell you now.
Like a bottle?
I mean, honestly, I don't even know. Like the
But enough to
quantities.
get drunk every day.
Right. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And at that time, my drinking wasn't as severe as it has been the last handful of years, to where I'd wake up and take more shots, you know, and keep it going on benders. But it was too much for sure.
How did you do that and function the next day? Like, how did you
Yeah, dude.
go to work?
Because I was young.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah.
Really, like,
Isn't that crazy?
is.
I remember, I think I was like 21 at the time, and I was up partying the night before with my buddy. We had way too much tequila, and I was just hammered, dude. And I remember and I had like an hour and a half drive. This was in California, so I had to get up at 5 a.m., which ironically is now the time that I get up. But
Yeah.
back then, 5 a.m. was super early, but I had to get up at 5 a.m. And I think I was up until probably 2 or 3.
Yeah.
So I was still drunk, having to wake up and go to work.
Yeah.
There's no fucking way I
dude.
could pull that shit off today. There's
doubt.
no way.
well, and we can jump into the alcohol abuse here in a minute, but yeah, that's as the older I got, the detoxing, the hangovers were so bad. That's why I would just keep going, because I would drink heavily, and then the next morning, a couple shots helps you.
Were you
After-
drunk on duty often?
No,
No.
I do. I mean, I remember one specific time, which looking back, I think the DA knew. There was a handful of us that had a trial the next day and had to, we had to testify, and we were up till 2 or 3 in the morning drinking, pounding shots, and we all get there. And the room had to have stunk like alcohol, and
Just
all
a
of a
bunch
sudden
cops
the
showing
DA,
up.
yeah, all of a sudden the DA comes
wasted.
in and is like, "It got continued. You can all go home." I was like, "Sweet, I need to go get a beer," But now looking back, and again, it's like everybody's so scared to say something. Like I wish even in that moment that DA could have pulled somebody aside and been like, "Hey," but again, there's a lot of that's just the norm. So.
And it's almost the culture, huh?
Yeah.
So it doesn't often get brought up as are
Right.
you okay or do you have a problem?
Yeah. And
'Cause it's just sort of you fit in.
dude, to be honest, if somebody would have asked me then, I'd have been like, I'm fine.
Right.
Which is crazy because, like I said, even looking back, I was planning my suicide on duty. I had a gun to my head. And every time something happened and I got through it, I said, all right, as long as nobody finds out. I went through this course. It's called the Crisis Intervention Team Training, which I did not want to go to. My sergeant signed me up for it. Like I said, man, I was the dude. I never made the SWAT team in the second department I was on, but I went through SWAT school on my own at the other department I was with. Super high speed. If there's a fight or shots, I want to be there. I want to be in it. I want to be the first on scene. Shoot at me. You're not going to get me. If you do, I'll never know. And so this training is more touchy-feely, right?
Okay.
Oh, we want to talk about feelings. And I'm like, stupid, don't want to do this. My sergeant signed me up for it, so I didn't have a choice. So I go to it. Very reluctant, closed-minded, and it's all about how to deal with people who are going through mental health crisis. And looking back, it was a blessing. I needed that. And it really has set me up for a lot of what I do now and how I'm able to help people. And we get to a certain chapter, and it's talking about depression. And as we're reading through it, I'm like, oh shit, that's me, that's me, that's me. And I remember my very next thought was, nobody can find out. I'll lose my career.
That you were depressed.
Right, that I had depression, that I have a mental illness, right? Because as a cop, you go through so many psychological tests and polygraphs and all this stuff to get the job. And so the last thing you want is for anybody to know. And again, looking back,
Does that ever come up on any of the tests or exams that you do? The
No.
depression piece or
it didn't
anxiety?
at that time. And honestly, so I had my first job. I already had it lined up, and then after 5 years of that, I was super bored, wasn't fulfilling to me. So I started applying at other places, and I kept getting denied from all these other agencies. I was being super truthful about everything. And then finally I was like, whatever. I figured out how to get through a polygraph and lie, and get through the psychology test. Yeah.
Really?
Oh yeah. For me anyway. Well,
everybody wants to know. Come on.
and it
How do you pass
depends.
the polygraph?
I just know it worked for me.
Uh-huh.
So I would just have the same cadence of what I said in my head after I answered a question. Because a polygraph, what they look for is not your answer, but how you react
After
physically.
you give the answer?
Yeah. So you're hooked up to a heart
Interesting.
monitor, blood pressure monitor, right? So if you tell a lie and then you start thinking about it, you know you told a lie. Now your heart rate's going to go up a little bit. It might bump a little bit. So my trick was to always say ABC 1, 2, 3 over and over and over, like nice and calm and slow after every answer.
Was that like just you did research on how to pass
I
the
don't know.
polygraph?
I don't even
was
know.
Like dudes in the department that were kind of coaching you on it. They're like, that's interesting.
I don't even think I Googled it because Google wasn't even that big of a thing back then. But yeah, I don't.
You would just repeat this sort of like
Yeah.
mantra or whatever after the fact. And
after every question, because they ask you control questions too, because they'll say, I want you to lie intentionally. And they'll say, is your name Jeff Marr? And you say no. And then like they look at how you reacted to that lie that you both know is a lie, and then they compare it. So
interesting.
Anyway, I would just do the same thing after everything, and so yeah, I ended up passing it. So really, at some point, it comes down to like a cat and mouse game. But if you take out the mental health part of any of it, I mean, I wasn't a danger to others. I was a danger to myself.
Sure.
But I wasn't a danger to others. But like, you kind of want cops that are a little bit crazy, like because somebody who's got all their senses about them isn't going to go into gunfire.
Sure.
They're going to be like, oh, I'm going to wait for that to quit shooting.
A buddy of mine who was in Denver SWAT.
Yeah.
I'll never forget it, and I had never thought about it, but he's like, hey, usually like if there's gunfire or there's some, crime being committed or something that's like a bad situation, most people will run away from it.
Yeah.
But like we're trained to run to it.
Right.
And I always thought that was fascinating. I'm like, wow,
Yeah.
dude, that's crazy. I mean, because that takes some balls.
It's that mentality. It's like what I first talked about. Like you either have it or you don't. Because there is unfortunately plenty of cops, and you hear stories all the time that don't run to it either. They're cops
Sure.
and they're there and they run away. Or you watch these different videos and they're the ones standing aside while a couple other cops are fighting with somebody for their life. And they're just kind of standing back like, oh, I don't know what to do.
Jeez.
So you have to be mentally prepared.
That's got to be frustrating too.
Oh yeah, man. Well, and I'm still, like I said, I'll always be that guy and that mentality. Like I hear a loud noise in a store and I go towards the noise.
Interesting.
I have no guns on me. I don't know. If I'm in Walmart, I'll grab a clothes rack and smack somebody with it. But I'm not running away. That's for sure. And that's just the mentality that I have.
Had the depression, was that something that was consistent in your life prior to going into the police force?
I guess that whole story I told about that training I did, which ultimately, honestly, it ended up being the top 3 trainings I ever had in the hundreds of hours of training. So it was a blessing. And after that, I talked a couple people out of suicide one guy was right on the other side of the doorway from me with a knife and was like, dude, if you poke your head around with that knife, I got to shoot you. But I don't want to do that. Had I not done that training and really understood, somebody's just going through a crisis and they just want somebody to give a shit. And I could be that guy. That never would have happened. I would have challenged him because I was just me, Sure. So, but yeah, that did solidify the fact that I remember I was like 13 years old. My dad at one time was like, what is going on with you? And I said, I don't know. I'm just sad. I don't know why. I'm just sad. And their solution was pray more. And so coming from like a Christian home and all that, so I would pray and pray and pray, and that didn't take it away. And so finally I gave up on God after a while. And
Are you still in touch with your parents?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Are they still married?
They are.
They are?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It was my stepdad and mom, but they're still married. Yeah. For 36 years now, something like that. But yeah.
So their answer was to pray?
Yeah. Pray more.
Okay.
And to this day, they don't quite understand depression either. And it's one of those things, and why I share so much about what I do, it's like, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
Because there's been plenty of times I'll have a depressive episode and I still go through it. I just know how to cope and bring it with me. Like I call it almost, it's like my backpack. When I'm going through depression, I still get up, I make my bed, I go to work, I go to the gym. I'm sad. I feel like I could drop down and cry at any minute, but it comes with me. It doesn't dictate my day and how I respond.
How did you develop that mindset, and how do you get yourself, for anybody listening that struggles with depression, and I think a lot of people do. I've experienced depression, and you're right. It's like when you experience that, it's very difficult, at least for me, it's very difficult to like think about the solution or find a way to pull yourself out because you're in this state of mind that doesn't really allow for much else. And so was this like just training you went through, or is this something you developed yourself? And what would you give us, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 tactical steps that somebody could take if they're experiencing depression to maybe help move them in the opposite direction?
Yeah. I think, when I talk about depression, for me, I describe it as like an elephant sitting on your soul. Like you don't want to die, you just don't want to be here. And so it's not even necessarily suicidal, and it's not induced by an environmental situation, right? I could literally win the lottery, wake up tomorrow morning and have an episode and just want to die, like just not want to be alive. Not because anything bad's happened, just because that's the chemicals and that's the cycle that goes through my brain. I will say through that CIT training I did, one of the things that they did teach us, which was huge, was you don't always have to try to fix somebody. And if they're not asking you to fix them, don't. But most importantly, don't tell somebody what they're going through if you don't. Like a simple example would be you're talking to somebody who's depressed and they're like, oh, my dog just died, blah, blah, blah. And you said, oh, yeah, I understand. I can relate. And they're like, oh, when did your dog die? And if you tell them, if you can't bullshit them quick enough, or if that didn't happen and you're like, oh, well, I just think that, my dog didn't die. You lose credibility with them. You just lost that person because you were their last ditch effort to still stay, and talk to somebody. And now they can't even trust you. So a lot of it is if you're talking to somebody with depression, what you would say to somebody like that is, that sounds really bad. Like, I've never experienced that, but I can imagine that would really suck. And then you could ask them to talk about it some more if they want to. A lot of times, sorry, I kind of sidetracked a little bit there.
No, it's fine.
You don't really ask me how you talk to somebody going through it, but to me, I really suggest to people to not try to fix them. Like, if somebody's going through it, like kind of was alluding to is I used to get told a lot, just go for a walk in the sun. And I'm like, I'm a smart fucking dude. Like, I have 9 businesses. I wrote a book. Like, I'm a smart person. If walking in the sun cured depression, nobody would be depressed. Like, that's not what it's about. And so when you ask about like the resiliency or how I learned it, it's really a matter of, and it's my coaching company. It's called Me Versus Me. And it's really, once I finally established the fact that I don't let any other human in this world talk to me the way that I talk to myself. And that's the battle. It's how you talk to yourself, how you treat yourself, and then who you're going to let win in your head. It's like the story of 2 wolves, right? The wolf that you feed is the one that's going to survive. So you have this voice in your head that's telling you what a failure you are, reminding you of all this bullshit. But then you also have this badass side of you that's been resilient, and there's a reason you're still alive to this day. And anybody that struggles with depression knows what I'm talking about. You have plenty of times that you just don't want to be alive anymore. So if you've made it this far, you got that bulldog inside of you. Like, that's the one you want to feed in that moment. And some of it's fake it till you make it, like.
Well, give us an example of like, what would you feed it? You're talking like daily, positive self-talk, what you're saying to yourself?
If you can, and sometimes you can't. And like, sometimes I just need to compartmentalize it and understand, or I call it putting it in a box in my brain. So I'll say, okay, I'm depressed, or I just had this suicidal thought. Okay, I had it. I'm not going to act on it. And I kind of put it on a shelf, like it's there. It's not just going to go away. But I gave it as much power as I needed to allow myself to feel that feeling. And then I put it there and I keep going about my day. Before, I used to dwell on it a lot until I would start drinking. And then drinking really made my physical body match what my mental health or what my mental state felt like, super shitty overall. So, really for me, it's just daily routines and habits and just doing it, whether you feel like it or not. I just did a podcast a couple of days ago, and it's like, you're right where you're supposed to be. And if you don't like where you are, start making better decisions to get to where you want to be. But really just understanding and accepting. I mean, I've been arrested many times since I lost my career, unfortunately, always surrounding alcohol. But the last time I was sitting in a holding cell, and I still remember that moment, I'm counting little paint dots on the floor because I was so bored. But I was right where I was supposed to be. I didn't want to be there, but I wasn't making good decisions to not be there. So a lot of it is the same with like depression and just understanding, like, it's going to pass. Time is going to heal it. That's the only thing that heals it for me. I don't take any medicine for it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I don't like feeling out of control or just numb.
Sure. And
I believe humans have been around for a long time and have figured out ways to deal with depression. You know, depression is not new. And
Yeah.
a lot of that is community, who you surround yourself with. You know, I make sure I get to the gym still, even when I'm depressed. I start every day out by making my bed, whether I feel like it or not.
Yeah. I think, unfortunately, one of those ways has become medication.
Yeah.
And man, I've heard countless stories, and it's really, to me, it's very tragic. It's sad, but stories about, you know, people that went on to antidepressants. They were on the antidepressants for years. They really helped the person. And then for whatever reason, they stopped and they like killed themselves.
Yeah.
You know,
They
took their life.
Yeah, I want to say it's 2017, maybe 2016, somewhere in there. But I got put on a mental health hold for 3 days because I was suicidal, and I got put on Lexapro. I took that for 6 weeks, and I just quit cold turkey. I didn't like it. It was making me lose weight, and so when you're me,
Yeah.
body dysmorphia issues, and always were the little guy. Like losing a pound sucks, right?
Is that still something you struggle with?
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah. Oh yeah, I have bad body dysmorphia for sure. I still look at myself like the 130-pound kid that I was. So,
No kidding.
but yeah, I've never been more suicidal in my life than when I quit that. And it's the wrong, like you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to wean off of it. So if anybody's taking that, like, don't just quit.
Yeah.
Wouldn't recommend it.
Right.
But I knew
What do you
after
experience if you do?
I just experienced just like I said, that soul crushing feeling, but it would not go. It would not let up. It was horrible. And it's just this repeat record in your head over and over of just, I want to die. I'm going to die. I want to die.
I feel like every medication that I'm aware of, and by the way, guys, like disclaimer, I'm not saying, you know, don't take medication or do take it, like talk to your doctor or healthcare provider. But what I've found in my experience is that every medication out there, whether it's for depression or anxiety, initially, all of that shit does help. And when I say initially, I don't know, maybe for a month or so.
Right.
But ultimately, it creates more of the thing that you took it for to get rid of in the first place.
Right.
Right. And it's just amazing how this stuff is so widely prescribed.
Yeah.
And I totally believe it has a place for sure. Also, I think when it comes to depression or any state of mind that you're uncomfortable with or that you don't want to be in, and I would imagine in general, most people don't want to sit in a state of mind of depression. Like I think most people would not want to be in that place mentally. So when you're in the place, there are really only two paths out of it that I can see. Number one is to think your way out of it, right? And I think as human beings, we all have an ego and want to pride ourselves to a greater or lesser degree on our intelligence and ability to come up with a solution and think of a solution to a problem, right? And so we end up doing that with the depression somehow, like if I go walk in the sun, but it's a conversation with ourselves on all the things that, you know, we can do to solve the problem. The number two, or the other way, is the opposite of literally not thinking at all and just doing, having enough thought to just get you to do. Even though, like you said, I don't feel like going to work. I don't feel like making my bed. I don't want to do it. And it's almost like this internal protest, but finding the next best thing that you can do that is simple enough to give yourself a sense of accomplishment, right?
100%.
And so I guess my question to you is like, what is it that's worked for you, and what have you seen work for other people? Is there like a protocol to, you know, like go exercise or do something physical, or is there like a formula that you've seen work, or is it just totally different for everybody?
I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter what you're doing as long as you're doing something. I think what you just said hits the nail on the head. I say it all the time, next best decision. You know, like if something doesn't work out or isn't working out, what's the next best decision? And really, as you're saying all that, the one word that comes to my mind is dedication. So you don't need motivation. You don't need inspiration. I actually I've started taking out a lot of hashtag motivation, you know, like it's bullshit, you know, and usually you get motivation when you start doing something. But once you're dedicated to something and once you have a personal resolve that you don't want to feel a certain way and you don't want to be in a certain state again, that's when you make the decisions to keep yourself out of it. So I know it sounds simple, but that's what's worked for me, even with alcohol. So it's one of those things, you know, I feel like shit. All I want to do is mope around. I don't sleep. When my depression's bad, I have insomnia and I don't sleep. So I'm the opposite. So I can't relate to anybody that's like, all I want to do is sleep all day. I don't want to sleep. I don't really want to be awake. I'm just kind of a zombie, just floating.
Are you doing something during that time?
All the time, still. Like so people wouldn't know. I could be severely depressed right now. Nobody would know because I'm just going to do what needs to get done. And it is kind of like.
Were you always like that though with your depression? This is something you've developed,
yeah,
right? As like a core belief.
Oh yeah, 100%. And in the last 8 months of not drinking, it's just gone over the top and been better because, like I said, when I would use alcohol to cope with it, well, that depressant alcohol drug that you're putting in your body just reaffirms that everything sucks to a point, right? You always start out with these high intentions and you're great, but once you hit a certain level,
sure,
and then you wake up with the extra anxiety and you're hungover and the shakes, and I've had 4 or 5 seizures detoxing, and so yeah, that just adds to all of it. So it is just having a personal resolve. So if I'm working with somebody who wants to get better, at the end of the day, maybe there's no getting better. Maybe it's the thorn in your side that never goes away. How do you live with it? And like I said, that's where you're coming with me. You're like, yeah, I feel like shit. I'm having suicidal thoughts all day. I don't even want to be alive anymore. And for no reason other than just my brain is like tired. I don't know what it is, but I'm still go to the gym. And so I think you get yourself these little wins, and it helps to, for me anyway, it helps to speed up the cycle, right? So my episodes used to go 2-3 weeks at a time of just feeling like total dog shit. So now it's probably like 4 or 5 days. I feel them coming on. I know when they're coming on. And I was just talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, I'm a crier. Like, that's how I express my emotions. Yeah.
Sure.
And I don't care. Right. Like, I usually do it in the shower and whatever. But like, I'll ugly cry sometimes. But at the same time, if somebody were to walk into my house, I'm going to go snap their neck. You know, like.
Yeah. So, I also think it's healthy. Right. Yeah. It's healthy to like relieve whatever the emotion is, you know. Right. We have our son in some play therapy, and you know, because he's very intense, very emotional, very sensitive, very smart, an amazing kid, but just struggles with some stuff. So anyway, we have him in this play therapy, and at first, my wife and I were concerned because during the play therapy, like a lot of his anger would come out, and he can really get just massive anger, you know, out of nowhere. And so we talked to the therapist, and the therapist was like, no, that's actually good. Like, you want him to release that. Can you imagine if you feel an emotion that's that intense and you don't have like the teapot valve or whatever to release the steam? Right. It just boils up and eventually he's going to explode. So you want him to release that anger, and just like with any emotion, right? Being able to cry and feel it. But I feel like as men though, there's just sort of this thread since the beginning of time, right? Where it's like, we have to protect and provide. We can't show weakness. And you know, we got to go kill. We got to hunt and kill, and there's no time to talk about our feelings.
Well, a lot of that is your mindset beforehand too, right? And like somebody tells you that, but not crying makes you tough. Like, I don't know. Right. I know what you're saying because that's how I was raised too. Don't cry and quit crying and all that. But it's like, crying is an emotion, you know? Yeah. I mean, if I'm crying, like I said, if somebody breaks in my house, I'm in the middle of crying, I'll be crying while I break their neck. Like, and then I'll cry with them. Like, sorry, bud. Like, my bad. But like, that doesn't mean that you're less prepared to take care of your family,
Sure.
Provide, protect. And you're probably better off because you did release that emotion and you gave yourself permission to be a human. At the end of the day, like, you wouldn't cry if it wasn't ingrained in you to cry.
Yeah.
Right? That's what, believe in God, the universe, whatever, like, we were created with that emotion for a reason. So to just defy how we were created and be like, oh, we just don't do that.
Right.
Cool, tough guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Good luck with
Don't
that.
cry.
Right.
Yeah. So I think going back a little bit to what you were asking about, how to not speed up the process, but how you get through depression and this kind of stuff. What I have learned above all that's helped the most, and it's what I coach more than anything, it's just having that elite mindset to begin with. The time to cure your depression isn't when you're depressed. It's because for me, it happens typically on like a 3-month cycle. Every 3 months it'll hit. Well,
Is there
put
any,
in the work.
reason behind that? Do
I
you
have
know where
no
that
idea.
comes from? That's just for you. It's every few months.
It is, because it's not triggered by events. I mean, I've gone from having 2 cents literally in the world and being happy to having a ton of money and being depressed and want to die.
Sure.
So it's not environmental. And that's what I say, and sometimes people are like, oh, my girlfriend broke up with me, I want to kill myself. Like, well, you're just kind of weak in my mind. But anybody that's going through that, I apologize. Like, if you need me, hit me up. But like, life happens. You're supposed to be sad.
Like the most common thing on the planet.
Right. Yeah. Like,
get over it.
When shit happens, you're supposed to be sad. Like, feel it.
Yeah.
Appreciate the fact that you got the opportunity to love somebody enough for them to break your heart. Like, at the end of the day. But when you have depression, severe depression,
of like that positive self-talk and what you're telling yourself.
For sure. But when you wake up and everything's great, and you went to bed and everything's great, and you wake up and just want to fucking die, that sucks. Like, you didn't do anything. It's like, what did I do to deserve this? So it's almost like preparing for a fight, and it's also why I do coaching and not therapy. Because I'm like, how do we get better? How do we keep getting better? So you prepare yourself before the fight comes. Before the battle hits, you're ready.
So what would you say for you is the difference between therapy versus coaching in this example, like somebody dealing with depression? And also, just for those listening, like, let them know kind of who you coach or who the ideal individual is that you can help.
Yeah, and I'm not a therapist. Haven't gone to school for it. Not putting down therapists. I've gone to therapy plenty. Like, there's a point for it. I see it more as therapy being reactive and focused on the past a lot and kind of unpacking what you've been through and giving yourself permission as to why you're feeling what you do. But who gives a shit? Like, what's happened. Like, how do you get better? Yeah. That's where the coaching comes in. And I take the same approach I used when I coached sports. I coached high school sports for a while. I mean, I played sports, love sports. But it's like, you watch film, right? And I coach football, so you watch film from the last game, you pick out where you fucked up, what you got to do to get better, and now you put in a new game plan for next week. You don't watch the film every day, right? You watch the film once, you see where the mistakes were. Now, how do you get better? And that's how I approach coaching.
Okay. Is that one-on-one with people or group coaching? How do you do it?
Yeah, I do both.
Okay.
But I eliminate excuses a lot. The one that I hear the most is I don't have time. People are like, oh, I don't go to the gym. I just don't have time. When I get a little bit more time. And I'm sitting there like, and I've been told I'm a little bit different than people, but that's fine. We have 9 companies. I have 7 kids. I have a lot of shit going on. I go to the gym every day. I mean, my construction companies, I go from shoveling, moving around concrete all day, be dog shit tired. I'm going to the gym. Like, that's my routine. That's what I do. And anytime somebody's like, oh, guess you don't need to go to the gym today. I'm like, all right, you're weak. Like, it's a different workout. It's a different mentality. I go to the gym. I change in the locker room every day. I come out of the locker room like I'm walking onto the field. That's my spot. So,
well, just for whatever reason at that time, they haven't made that a priority.
Right. That's it. For sure. And that's what I talk to people about. And it's like, no. And I'm like, that's fine. If you don't want to, just say that. But you're never going to get better and get ahead in anything until you admit where you're really at. So when somebody says I don't have time, and then you debunk all that bullshit, and they're like, okay, well, yeah, I'm just not ready, or just don't want to. Yeah. Cool. Well, say that.
Right.
And you're probably not going to hire me at that moment. And that's fine. Yeah. And the optimal performance coaching I do is just about how do you keep getting better? Whatever it is that you're doing, how do you get better? Where do you want to go? And then here's the steps we take to get you there. And most of it is mindset.
Do you feel like you're more impactful with the individual that already has developed some level of success or some level of habits, and now they just want to go to the next level with it, or the person that's like totally stuck and you got to help them get out of that?
Yeah, I'm definitely more impactful for somebody that has experienced some kind of pushback in life and been able to push through it. Because the last thing I want to do is just take somebody's money, and I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste their time. I do it because I care and I want to help people get better, and it helps me get better. It doesn't help me at all to try to coach somebody that isn't ready, doesn't really want to try, is just full of excuses.
For sure.
Shows up to 2-3 coaching sessions, then drops off. I don't want that. So, I mean, I basically interview people, and I'm not trying to say that from like an arrogant standpoint, but I don't want to waste my time either.
Yeah.
I would literally rather not coach anything than to just coach somebody who's not ready. I actually had somebody a while back, and once I sent him pricing, it was like, oh, okay. And, he kind of made it seem like I was just all about money. And I was like, there's plenty of free information on Google, man. Like,
well, you got to pay to pay attention, right?
For sure. And I pay plenty, for the coaching I receive, the mentorship I receive, and all that. And so to me, it's like when you're ready, it's like, cool, I'm going to make it happen because I want it to happen. But it's that mindset for sure, and when you're not ready, you'll come up with any excuse that you want. But, like I said, I could have tried to, haggle with him and, oh, what can you afford? And I'm like, no, whatever, man. And like I told him, and I wasn't trying to be rude, but it is true. Like, you can Google anything. I mean, anybody can Google any of the stuff I do. Yeah. You can listen to podcasts, you can read books, you can get all of it. When somebody hires me, it's just because we can relate at some level and they want me to help keep them accountable. None of it earth shattering, like we all know what to do. And 90% of my coaching is asking somebody the question that they already have the answer to. You just reframe it. And then when somebody is like, it's eliminating excuses. Like I said, once you eliminate people's excuses and they finally understand that, they're good.
Yeah.
And my goal is for them to fire me after one, not one session, but like we go through one coaching program. You don't need me anymore. Find another level or go do what you want to do. Find another coach in some other realm.
That was probably the single biggest aha moment I had with 75 Hard was realizing how many excuses I had, how many bullshit justifications and why I couldn't do this part of it. And once I finally got to a point where I was like, really what happened is it became, in my mind, the most important thing. Like in other words, if I didn't do this, everything else was going to go away.
Yeah.
And so it became the thing. And that's what I then made a priority. And, if for those of you that don't know anything about 75 Hard, like the first rule to that whole challenge is there are no compromises with any of it.
Yeah.
Like there's no alterations to it.
Yep.
There's no different version you can create. It's literally, this is it 100% the entire 75 days. And so I would agree with you, man. Like the amount of excuses out there is just crazy. And what's ironic is as I was getting towards the end of 75 Hard, looking at his Live Hard program, the next phase 2, I think it was like, you add into it all the shit you were already doing. You add in gratitude and like a cold shower or something.
Yeah.
Just seeing these additions, my brain started to do the same thing. Man, I can't do a cold shower for 5 minutes, or like, how am I going to write 10 things I'm grateful for every morning? Or but it was just like that whole thing started again. So
I love to, just on that point, I love to tell people if it's easy to do, it's easy not to do. It's easy to make your bed. It's easy not to make your bed. But really, if you can establish that mindset too, and that helps you eliminate an excuse too. It's like, I don't want to. Well, cool. What'd you sign up for this for then? To do what you don't want to do or to get better?
Yeah, right.
So if you want to get better, you got to do shit you don't want to do. And then everything else follows. And it's funny too, because when you made that the number one thing, and I look at my struggle with alcohol, I was a good alcoholic. Like I've excelled in everything I put my mind to in life, including being an alcoholic. When that's all that mattered, and anybody who struggles or addict or like, you understand what I'm saying. Like, you'll spend your last dime to get your fix. Yeah. And so if you have that mindset anyway for that, you can turn that into anything and be successful at it. But for sure, once you make it a priority, and that's that dedication piece. If you're dedicated to something, you make it happen. I usually ask people when they say I don't have time, be like, what show are you watching on Netflix right now? Like, oh, it's this one. Oh, yeah. How many episodes a night? Oh, yeah, like 3, 4, 5. Like, that's a workout. Like, you have time.
Yeah.
You rather sit on your couch and eat Cheetos and watch Netflix.
Dude, and it's amazing the amount of time that gets wasted, especially with social now.
Yeah.
Like, dude, it's great. Like, if you're not careful,
Yeah.
you can just go down the rabbit hole and get lost. And it's like,
Yeah.
I mean, people are probably spending way more time than they think with that, and it's doing really nothing for their lives.
100%. Well, and we know, even trying to build a brand and all that, I'm like, I want to put it down.
True. I just think that there's a difference between consuming and creating.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
But hey, before we wrap up, man, tell us about the book, The Drive, and tell us about your supplement company.
Yeah, so The Drive, my little brother, he's 7 years younger than me. He was involved in a really bad head-on collision. It's been 3 years ago now. He was trapped for over an hour. It was in a remote place out in Wyoming. And ultimately, like, modern day medicine kept him alive. People can believe what they want. A lot of my family says God kept him alive, this and that. And I'm grateful he's alive, but his quality of life isn't great. He's in a wheelchair still. He's got a traumatic brain injury. Hopefully he gets better one day. That's all we can hope for now. But really what it came down to was, in my 8 years as a cop, I processed a lot of trauma, but from the outside. It never hit close to home, and so a lot of this, we started a Facebook page and a GoFundMe right away that raised a couple $100,000. Like, there's tons of people involved in the story. And I just started writing and sharing on Facebook, like, what I was going through, and just being really raw and open. And I got a lot of feedback, and people said, hey, if you wrote a book, I'd buy it. And a lot of people have told me, even after reading the book, when they've experiencing that trauma, it helps to read somebody else's side of it. And like I said, I'm raw about it, and there's times in the book I even talk about, like, he should have died. Like, why is he here? And not only that, sometimes it is selfish, but we're the ones going through it, right?
Yeah,
like,
right.
He's in a coma in a bed, and we're all waiting for him to wake up. My life, it didn't really spiral, but I lost a ton of money, a ton of work because I was there, and all for, obviously to support my brother, but it does just talk about that. But then ultimately just having the resiliency through all of it, and obstacles are going to happen. How do you get through it?
That's awesome, man.
I think one of the biggest lessons that I took from the whole thing, my little brother he was a provider for sure, but he didn't have the same mindset as me as far as just like, let's get it done, let's make shit happen. And it's one of those things that I really try to tell people about. Like, you want to have these mindsets and this stuff in place before you have to.
Yeah.
You see stories about people who get up and walk when they said they never would again. I don't believe you develop it. And it's just like the whole depression thing. Like, I don't think you develop that after you need it.
Yeah, right.
So it's like, get yourself to a place before you need it, so you're prepared when it happens.
Yeah, it's like you fall back on the training.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
That's cool. And then tell us about your supplement line here.
Yeah, so my supplement line, Win Every Day. And I came up with that title because somebody told me about this company a while back called Compete Every Day. And they make t-shirts and like inspirational shirts, this and that. And as soon as I saw that, and it's just my mentality, I was like, I'm not competing, I'm trying to win. Like,
Yeah.
so that's where the name came from. But
That's awesome.
yeah, it's I have 140 supplements, and I have this little thing on the back here, but really the proceeds from this benefit another nonprofit I started called the Urban Veteran Project.
Okay.
And what that is to provide resources to former first responders, healthcare providers. Once you're out, and it sucks because you have dedicated your life in everything you are to a certain craft. And for me, it was being a cop. I lost out on a ton of kids' birthdays, family events, holidays, because I was a great employee. And when you're out, you're out. And there's no resource. There's no ongoing, there's no ongoing mental health, counseling, coaching, therapy, anything. And you deal with it for life. It's a life sentence. If you want to be a first responder, it's for life that you have to deal with the repercussions. And having said all that, I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would go do it right now if I could. But anyway, the Urban Veteran Project is just to help support, people who need job placement, housing, counseling, therapy, coaching.
That's awesome, dude.
That's the biggest reason I started this line. I mean, everybody who works out buys supplements, so why not support a great cause and help those who helped us?
Yeah, dude, I love it, man, and I really, really appreciate you coming on the show, dude. This was fantastic, man, and hopefully you'll come back, and look forward to watching your coaching career blow up, guys. Again, go follow him at the Bearded Bodybuilder on Instagram. Check him out, and I'm sure we'll have him back on the show. Thanks so much, brother.
Right. Turn that loss to a check. Every time that I see a limit, I push right past it. Don't care if you got here first, the one to win is the last one standing. Say my life is like luck, nah.